You're listening to Mentoring Developers. You get your first job, you want to move on, you have your digital presence, your internet presence. Make sure that everybody who looks for you finds relevant things and not irrelevant things. That's good. And then you have a good resume and you apply for jobs. How do you apply? Where do you go? Do you just go to LinkedIn, or do you go to job sites, or do you just talk to people and don't go to job sites? Do they work?
Sure. So that's the thing. One thing that I think is really great about having a great LinkedIn profile, especially LinkedIn, is I found that recruiters who are more legitimate will find you on LinkedIn. If you have your LinkedIn cleanup, the non-sketchy recruiters will come on LinkedIn. Some sketchy ones too, but a little bit less sketchy than like just putting your resume on Dice and Indeed. My first position I found applying through Dice. So yes, the job sites do work. But my second position I found through a recruiter who works for a company that I had spoken with previously about other positions, and they were all really great. They kept up with me, I guess, because I also kept up with, LinkedIn, right? So that's what I would say is the job sites do work. But I think most of the people I know who've gotten their second and their third jobs have done so through recruiters. I have a friend who started her kind of first, PM/UX/developer position at this startup because I talked to a recruiter who I knew and then referred her. No, actually, my friend was recruited by this recruiter. Then I talked to them, then I passed this on to her. So having that network through the LinkedIn, through the meetups is important because people might know, hey, you said you were looking for a job, right? Well, I talked to this lady, right? So that can happen. Obviously, I got a job off of Dice, so that also happens. And third, keeping up with LinkedIn, keeping up with these recruiters, the ones that treat you well, treat them all back. No, I don't know anybody, but thanks for sending this along. Those kinds of things.
So that's good to know. You need to be everywhere. Essentially, if you were looking for your second job or even your first job or your third job, you don't know where is that job, right? You don't know which city. Maybe you want to stay within your current metro area, which is fine.
Sure.
But if you are very specific about the type of work you want to do, maybe you want to expand it a little bit. And the recruiters, generally, they are local. So if you live in Austin, Texas, for example, then there could be a set of really good Austin recruiters, but they may not really know about jobs in Tennessee. But maybe you don't care. Maybe you can live in Nashville and there's a fantastic job there. So putting it on Dice will allow you to reach more people.
Sure.
But also,
absolutely.
You will get more spam. But that should be okay because you should be able to sift through it quickly and you'll get better at it over time. So then you apply for jobs and you need a good profile. So you need a good GitHub profile. Perhaps you need a good Stack Overflow profile. That can help. Yeah. Also, you need a very good, nice and organized LinkedIn profile, and you need to tie it all together. And I think what's important is that if people look at your resume, they should be able to find your GitHub and LinkedIn. If they go to LinkedIn, they should be able to find your GitHub, right? So make sure that the links are everywhere. And then, of course, you're doing open source. If you go to GitHub and you clone projects, and even if you just look at it, people will know that you cloned 10 things. And they will know, okay, this is what this person is interested in. Sure. So it sets you apart from the vast majority of people just do what they're told at work. So it's a luck of the draw. If you get to a great company with a bunch of great people, you will learn good things. Otherwise, you won't, and you don't care beyond that. Well, then you don't stand out. So all of that is good. Now, we come to the point where you apply, you have a bunch of interviews lined up. Now, what are these interviews like? Are they one-on-one? Are they, you just sitting in the middle and they're just surrounded by scary-looking managers? How does that go?
Oh my God. Okay, so the second time around, I feel like it's like a double-edged sword because one, you have more knowledge, so you understand how much information is out there. So it's harder to study for interviews because you're like, okay, this is a front-end position. Like, what do I study? Where do I start? So, ultimately what I would say is that it was a little bit easier because I did know more, but also more was expected of me. And so that's kind of where I struggled, was I wasn't exactly sure what are the like 2.0 expectations for me in this interview round, right? So, but yeah, so I mean, I think for me, what was easier too was the first time, obviously, I had an economic and a financial prerogative, like I need to find a job because I need money. But the second time around, it was very like, well, I don't really like this commute, so I'm not really gonna pursue this job, or I'm going to go interview here just for the experience so that I can be practiced in interviewing, but I'm not really going to follow through with this job. You can do things like that and it's not terrifying. And so the stakes aren't as high because you still have a paycheck. So that's what's really great the second time around. But I think, what really kind of helped the second time around was, as I mentioned, I had been coding projects in my spare time. So I had a little bit more, I think it was an attitude. I had a bit more of authority because I could be like, well, we tried it this way and it didn't work, so we had to try it this way. And even that way was limiting, but because like you can actually be an authority on something because you're working on stuff on your spare time. Whereas the first time around, you're basically just like, oh my God, give me a job. So, that's what I would say would be the biggest difference is, one, you do have a little bit more confidence. I probably should have studied maybe a little bit more for some of my interviews the second time around, but I wasn't super sure on what to study. But then I realized that, especially in front end positions, and I'm sure the same thing is true for full stack, it's always the same questions. Tell me about a float. What is a float? Or what's display? Tell me about the display properties in CSS. It's usually going to be the same gotcha questions they ask at every single interview, right? Or like, what's the difference between an interface and what is it, an abstract object or whatever?
An abstract class.
Yeah, they always ask the same questions. So, maybe they ask you to write a more complicated function, but it's always kind of the same kind of like fuzzy areas that you're going to be asked about. But they're going to take your code more seriously, I think, the second time around because they assume you have more skill. So that's what I would say is the biggest difference.
So let me tell you a little secret. When you are a new developer or a new professional in any field, you go for these interviews, you think, I don't know anything, and the person interviewing me knows so much and he's going to evaluate me. I'm insecure, he's secure. The reality is he's probably just as insecure as you are. And he's thinking, I'm not a good interviewer. I don't know what to ask. What if I'm found out? What if they realize I don't know jack? I have all these deadlines. Why am I doing this? All of these things are going through. That's why they're not prepared. That's why they end up asking you the same questions because probably they pulled it out of a website or something. And they don't take that much interest. That's the reality. That's sad because I take a lot of interest and I ask very pointed questions when I interview people.
I'm sure you do. Oh my gosh.
I have been told that I can be difficult, but I'm very good in evaluating. I want to put you through your paces, but I'm not going to evaluate you on your answers necessarily because that's not the point. Knowledge is easy to get, but the approach is hard. So there's that. So there's that part that people miss. And oftentimes when I go for interviews, so let me tell you a little bit of an inside thing. If I go for interviews, I have a swagger. I go in there. I am confident about what I know. And I know that I know very little, but whatever I know it, right? Yeah. And the other thing is the person interviewing me perhaps is not sure what to ask me. Yeah. Because maybe he is insecure, maybe he's not prepared, maybe he's tired. Notice I just said he and he because generally it's
almost always guys. Yeah.
It's always men. But here's the thing. Throw them a bone. Give them something to talk about. Give them a question to ask you. And the way you do that is to guide the questions through your answer. They're usually going to ask you, so tell me about yourself. Okay, this is your chance to shape this conversation. You can say, okay, so this is me. Don't go into your life detail. They don't care. But they want to know, okay, what they're asking you, make me care about you. And so you give them a thing, talk about a project, and this is what you did. You're excited about something. So naturally, they're going to ask you about that thing that you're excited about.
Yeah, that's true. They do that.
And that's what happens all the time. So you can guide the interviewer and just hold their hands and walk them through a path. All they want to know is, are you competent? Are you good? Are you wasting my time? And if you are enthusiastic, you are convincing them, no, you're not wasting their time. You have knowledge and you have passion, and it may be completely different from what they had in mind, but it doesn't matter, because most of the time they're just happy to see that. And so that's a little tip for everybody out there.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And it always works because they really appreciate somebody who takes interest in their craft, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point real quick, usually it is mostly almost exclusively men that are going to be interviewing you, and almost always white men. So yeah, I mean, I've did a lot of phone interviews the second time around, not so much whiteboarding, thankfully, but more kind of talking about code in a practical sense. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Excellent. So they might ask you to write, go on a whiteboard and write a solution for a problem, just code something up. It happens. It has been pretty common. More recently, I've started seeing some pair programming sessions when they hook you up with a computer and you work with somebody else and watching your screen, and so you can ask questions. That's a completely different type of challenge. And sometimes they give you take home things. I mean, they want to evaluate if you can code, but let me tell you something else that, again, a lot of new developers might not know this. Not every type of programming job, not every type of company or the subsection of the industry that we're in, because they're different. There are different technologies and enterprises and startups and all different kinds of work that we can do. Not every one of them makes you go through a coding interview.
Yeah.
And that could be, I think that would come as a surprise to a lot of people, because most new developers or people who are starting out, they keep hearing about code this, code that, Code Academy, just everything about coding.
Code, yeah.
But there's more to software development than just programming and coding. There's other things, and that are really valuable. And a lot of people, a lot of companies, they value that. And the coding is a small part of it, but that's the entire picture. And that's why I always like to bring people around to show them the full gamut of things that they can do. Not only that they can be, kick-ass coders.
Yeah.
They could also be people who are coding, but that's not their main job. There are a lot of testers, automated testers. They write code to test code. That's a completely different set of coding. And there's some people who do functional testing, load testing. There's some coding involved, but a lot of analysis. There could be business analysts. A lot of business analysts actually do write codes. Yeah. Excel macros and a little bitty codes, and coding really helps. So if you have some coding experience, but you feel like you're more interested in the analysis part, maybe you could be a business analyst. And there are lots of jobs for that. Not in startup companies. Generally, they're in big established industries like finance and so on, but they exist. And then obviously not everybody is able to manage a project, and so communicate to upper management. And so make things happen. That's project management. All of these things are within the scope of software development.
Sure.
That's why I stay away from saying that we're programmers or we're coders, because we're more than that. And all of us are included in this. Basically, I want to include everybody. I don't want to miss UX. Very important. User experience designers. And,
so important.
And web designers. They're all part of this large umbrella called software development. So I just want to point it out. If you think you suck as a programmer, it may be true. It's possible. Not everybody is cut out to be a programmer. You can still be in technology. You can still be in a software company and do something that requires some programming knowledge, but that's not your core task. So,
and you might even like it better. I mean,
yeah, some people are suitable for that. I know so many developers who are really good coders, right? They can code up things very quickly, but they're terrible project managers. Or they will make the worst testers, because in order for you to test, you need to think analytically. You need to think in segments. You sort of need to segment things out and be very thorough. And I have not seen a lot of developers. Unfortunately, the testing that we do is not very adequate. There's a manual testing part, there's functional, there's load testing and all other kinds of testing, but there's also automated testing. And in some companies, you will be surprised to know that there are dedicated automated testers. So developers don't do their own testing, or they don't write unit tests or integration tests. And they're just other people whose job is to just write end-to-end tests. And so in a programming language, but it's a much simpler paradigm. They don't have to know so much. And a lot of people like that idea of, running through their paces.
Sure.
So you can still make it in this field if you think you suck as a programmer. And by the way, I've thought that I suck. In fact, I think I do suck as a programmer, but I'm sticking around. I'm not giving up.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for listening.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.